Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is the third instance where I'm looking further into the Mridul Wadwah situation. And every time I look at it, the whole thing grows arms and tentacles and it goes wider reaching. Now, the first video I done about Mridul Wadwah was just the initial one where this guy, who's never changed sex legally, so he's a man, presents as a woman and managed to get the job as a CEO 4 years ago of the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre, and spent some time telling people that they were bigoted if these women who were rape victims didn't accept him as a trans woman. So that was a bit weird. And then he gets sacked. And then we done the story yesterday where we had the additional information that his husband, who's a man who appears to be a man and presents as a man, was given £1.4 million worth of contracts by local government in Scotland. His firm. He was a director at the time. We also discussed his connections to Maggie Chapman, the Green MSP, who actually gave Mridul Wadwah the job. He was on part of the panel giving him his job. This is a Green MSP. And also Nicola Sturgeon, who had Mridul Wadwah on a list of female candidates for potential MSP roles within the Scottish National Party. That's right, gave a man a list on an all-women candidacy list for Holyrood, right? So that was yesterday's debacle. What I found out today is, or since then, because some of the things I found out last night, again, and it just shows strange connections that I've still not all put together, but when you put the different bits of information, eventually you'll get another jigsaw piece and it will all fall into place one day. But today I want to discuss the connections between a company owned by Mridul Wadwah and her husband, transport company, who are heavily supported by the University of Edinburgh, and now the CEO of the charity Rape Crisis Scotland, who helped fund and give plaudits to the rape centres in Scotland. Their CEO is under a bit of pressure, and we've now found out things about her that connect to Edinburgh University. Now you should be sure as night forms into day and day forms into night that we will find out more information as the days go on, and these jigsaw puzzle pieces that might seem a wee bit random will eventually all fit in to the one big picture. So this additional stuff, a lot of it came by on Exit last night, where a account that goes by the name Feminist put a whole blog together, and it started off where somebody said, "Shame on you, Nicola Sturgeon, women won't wish," thing where somebody was quite vocal to Nicola Sturgeon when she was doing some convention with a lot of NGOs and stuff. Let's remember the women content to sit in silence while Nicola Sturgeon and Sandy Brindley let men like Mridul Wadwah harm women in need of support after rape. Now, this was posted by someone called Londoner Woman and brought in the name of Sandy Brindley. Now, Sandy Brindley is the woman who's the CEO of the charity that looks after rape victims in Scotland, right? So she and Nicola Sturgeon are getting it stinking at some convention. And then this feminist comes in and says, that's me speaking to Nicola. So that's on the camera. So I'll put this short video. So this tells you who this feminist account is.
Shame on you! You fermented this culture in Scotland that basically tells women are bigoted for standing up for women's rights. I see you, and thousands of women around Scotland see complicit, keeping their mouths shut while women have actually been raped by males who have self-ID'd as women, and that's got nothing to do with trans rights. And I support trans rights and have done for 3 decades now, and I'll continue to.
Surreal seeing this being shared loads over the last couple of days, because it was a few years ago. Sneaking into that conference without a ticket was Joyful Feminists, who I was with, were stopped at the desk and prevented from entering, even though they had tickets. I challenged Sandy Brindley, the CEO of Rape Crisis Scotland, this year at a criminal justice conference. She was on the panel. I challenged her trans activist partner, Professor Sharon Cowan, at another conference earlier this year. Guess where Professor Sharon Cowan was? I'm going to share a brief reason why I challenged Professor Sharon Cowan at a conference earlier this year in Edinburgh University, the same place that Mridul Wadwah business, transport business, where company get a lot of plaudits online, and I'll throw up the screenshot to prove that as well. So the feminist then started quite a long thread where she says, here goes. The conference I attended at Edinburgh University earlier this year was specifically about discussing and tackling the huge rates of sexual abuse occurring on all campuses. The panel was a mix of academics and Edinburgh University support staff. There was one student on the panel, a female, who happened to be a trans activist too. More of that later. As I read the information about the forthcoming conference, I noticed that Professor Sharon Cowan, also a major trans activist and partner of Sandy Brindley, the CEO of Rape Crisis Scotland, was going to be on the panel. This was the deciding factor for me attending. Let's scroll down. This is Professor Sharon Cowan. She is very influential on legalities, including trans rights. Just for context, and it shows you, she is a professor of feminist and queer legal studies. It's quite some title. More context, in 2021, a group of female survivors of sexual abuse / rape met with Sandy Brindley, the CEO of Rape Crisis Scotland, to discuss their concerns about proposed self-ID laws, especially with regards to wanting female-only practitioners and therapists. Well, that's quite a normal thing you'd imagine for rape victims to expect to be treated with by women. These brave women met Sandy Brindley at Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre. The women were supported and accompanied by Joan McAlpine, who was an MSP of the Scottish Parliament at the time. The group of survivors were called Heal Survivors, and they wanted assurances that they would be able to access female-only practitioners in light of the current political climate. At the meeting with Sandy Brindley, unbeknownst to the Heal Survivors and Joanna McKinley, Sandy had surreptitiously invited her trans activist partner to this confidential meeting, the Professor Sharon Cowan. Sharon Cowan was not introduced at the meeting. The woman thought she must be another survivor, just like them. Subsequently, when one of the women was sharing her concerns about the prospects of not being guaranteed a biological female practitioner, Sharon Cowan started to berate this woman in front of everyone, thus traumatizing this woman and the group. Inferring that these women were bigoted for wanting a female worker and a non-biological man, and not a biological man who identified as a woman, to be their therapist / practitioner, these women were not given any assurances that this meeting that they would get trauma-informed care, including female workers. How bizarre is this? So Sandy Brindley, she's the Rape Crisis Scotland CEO, big charity, brings her partner into a meeting, doesn't announce her, wasn't invited. It's a private meeting, by the way, not a public meeting, with people who are there saying, I've been raped. Quite confidential things they maybe want to talk about. And she brings her partner in who's a trans activist. So anyway, Sandy Brindley broke the anonymity of these survivors and broke their trust in having her trans activist partner present at the meeting, as it was clearly a nefarious agenda at play. It was an act of intimidation. Unsurprising, these women were devastated. Now back to me deciding to attend this conference in Edinburgh University. I went here with the sole purpose to challenge Professor Sharon Cowan on her repugnant behaviour towards the HEAL survivors, and in light of the nature of the conference regarding sexual abuse on campus. So I booked my place at this conference and I went along. Prior to going, I reread some of Professor Cowan's published academic papers just to remind myself again what I was dealing with. This will become clear shortly. At the conference, arrived, purposely took a seat further at the back in case I get recognised. Mostly students were attending the conference in what appeared to be normal uni classroom. The room was packed with the panel seated at the front. The panel discussed the huge rates of sexual abuse, including rapes, at all of the university campuses. It was pretty clear that this was and is a massive scandal, and that Edinburgh University were not dealing with this situation well. Even the reporting systems in place were not working effectively, nor were the numbers of incidents being properly documented. The number of incidents in the hundreds, let that sink in. Much was said about the need to create safe spaces on campus. These words were echoed again and again. It appeared to me that these issues were not being properly addressed by Edinburgh University, and obviously young women were mostly the victims. Towards the end of the panel discussions, even Professor Cowan mentioned the need of safe spaces for victims of sexual abuse on campus. I couldn't believe my ears. So I decided to use her comments to then sedge into what I wanted to say to her during question time. Question time, I waited approximately 4 people had asked questions in the panel before I came in, my notepad ready. Now for the fun part, my turn to ask the panel. I thanked the panel first and highlighted the need to create safe spaces on campus. I then turned to address Professor Cowan. I began by acknowledging her mention of the importance of safe spaces for survivors. I asked her how she can mention the need for safe spaces for survivors of sexual abuse when she berated the HEAL survivors at a confidential meeting at an Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre because these survivors wanted female-only practitioners' trauma-informed care. I also mentioned that the survivors did not know who she was and that it wasn't appropriate in any way for her to even be there. I told her she re-traumatised these women, shaming and berating them for wanting female-centred care. I then read out specific passages from one of her academic papers regarding sex by deception in the context of people concealing their trans identity. Her paper, An Apologist Piece, has some very questionable hypotheses. Unsurprisingly, she did not look happy and invited me for a chat afterwards in her office. I didn't go. I did, however, have trans activists going a bit mental at me during the conference for having the temerity to hold Professor Sharon Cowan accountable publicly. I will now be posting the academic paper in question on this thread shortly. I did think about writing a piece about this experience afterwards, but to be honest, I was incredibly jaded. Luckily, I wasn't assaulted during or after the conference, but I did get a bit of shit. Now people have been commenting, some posts are called Octopop. I listened to Sharon to get gaslit women in person. I cannot thank you enough for challenging her. Well done, you absolute hero. Or Shiro, I like that word, that's good. And the feminists come back. I'm sorry to hear you witness this gaslighting in person. It's vile, isn't it? So it's just bonkers that the whole thing is starting to bind together. So not only has the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre had a man who tells everybody he's a woman and has been quite bizarre towards people who just want to be treated by a woman, he's also admitted that 4 times per week he would go and help people with therapy, despite having no qualifications to do so. Now the person who is in charge of the umbrella charity overlooking all these rape places is a lesbian who has now been asked to stand down, and her partner is a very trans active person who at Edinburgh University is a professor. This is the same university that publicises, and I don't know about funding, but I will be looking into that, a business owned by Mridul Wadwah and her husband. So the whole thing's going full circle already, just drawing in more people. And this whole thing's a total scam. These people in positions of power are forcing their trans ideology onto others and getting away with it. And the reason they've been getting away with it is twofold. One, the rainbow flag has now incorporated all these colours and people are scared to question it because they believe that they'll be offensive to lesbian and gay people, when the majority of the lesbian and gay people want to distance themselves from the trans movement. So that's the first reason why a lot of people will not question some of the trans ideology. And the second thing is because, as we've seen, you will get cancelled. I spoke yesterday in a video about the very man, Graham Linehan, who was the writer of the fantastic Father Ted sitcom and the IT Crowd. And he has been banished to the ether by the cancel culture when you say anything about trans people. And they all seem to protect themselves and they're all intertwined. And this, by the way, we've even been putting this video out. I'll guarantee you people will come to me with more information. Something I'm trying to verify is a story retold to me about Mridul Wadwah, who insisted she helped in the therapy of a 14-year-old rape victim who was raped by 4 men. The trauma of a 14-year-old raped by 4 men having to speak to a man. Beggars belief. These people don't even care. Never mind try to help people. So there we go, that's today's dose. Now I'm quite sure in the next 24 hours I will stumble upon more information and people will want to give me information because that's how these things work. People go, there's a guy standing up talking about this. I'll tell them more information about it. That's how in the nature of these things happen. But there we go, just more appalling and hat off to the feminist on Twitter who I'll send a copy of this to. So I hope when you see it, I've done your words proud and I've not said anything wrong or inaccurate or not portrayed them in the way you wish your words to be portrayed. So, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please hit the subscribe and the notifications bell. Give me your comments below, love the comments, but most importantly of all, as long as you're not the type of people that want to pretend you're a woman, although you're still a man and never done anything to change that, and get yourself into female-only spaces, in particular talking to people who have been raped, which is pretty disturbing. As long as you're not that type of person, then...
Everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.